Could Libya return to civil war? Once again, two rival prime ministers are jostling for power, triggering fighting in the capital Tripoli. Elections are delayed and peace talks have made little progress. So what's next? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. People in Libya are voicing fears of a return to civil war. Two rival governments signed a ceasefire last year to end years of fighting following the fall of longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. They were supposed to work together and hold elections, but that hasn't happened. On Tuesday, the Prime Minister of the administration in Tobruk tried to install himself in the capital Tripoli. That triggered street battles which killed at least one person and wounded 5. Laura Berdemali reports.
A takeover attempt at the crack of dawn. The Prime Minister of the rival parliament in the eastern city of Tobruk tried to enter Libya's capital on Tuesday morning. But militias loyal to the UN-recognized government in Tripoli opened fire on his convoy. Hours of street battles forced Fathi Bashagha and his ministers to retreat. He's moving his government for now to Sirte, a city halfway between Tripoli and Tobruk. Bashagha says he doesn't regret the takeover attempt, saying leaders in Tripoli are refusing to give up power.
That government has worked to delay and undermine the election. They refused to go to the election approved by the international community and the UN. We did not resort to force or insults. We followed a political process.
His rival Abdulhamid Dbeibeh accused Bashagha of an attempted coup.
The eyes of the Libyans that I saw today combined fear and panic, but there was hope and challenge in them. The fear is to go back to the past, to war, to violence, to chaos, to destruction and to smoke.
Libya has been split between rival powers in the east and west since longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown and killed 11 years ago. After years of fighting, UN peace talks led to a ceasefire in March of last year. The opposing sides came together and chose Dbeibeh as the head of the National Unity Government. But splits re-emerged in December, when elections were postponed because of disagreements on candidates and how to hold the vote. 2 months later, the Tobruk-based parliament chose Fathi Bashagha as Prime Minister. Many Libyans say they want the divisions to end.
Fathi Bashagha put us in a very odd situation. The only solution for this conflict is holding elections.
Those who are fighting for power can go fight in the desert, and we will welcome whoever comes back victorious.
France has urged all sides to respect the ceasefire. But until the rival administrations agree on a path forward, many Libyans fear more violence to come. Laura Berdemali for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests in Tripoli. Salah Elbakkoush, political analyst. In Rome, Silvia Colombo, Associate Fellow in the Mediterranean, Middle East and Africa Program at the Institute of International Affairs. In Paris, Mustafa Fetouri, journalist and political commentator. Welcome to the program. Salah, let's try to understand exactly what happened in Tripoli. So this is the Prime Minister that was appointed by the Tobruk-based parliament, Fathi Bashagha, on his way to the capital to take over from the Tripoli-backed Abdulhamid Dbeibeh. And suddenly, street battles erupted. Who is to blame here?
Well, Bashagha tried several times to install himself in Tripoli and failed. And this time he tried to enter Tripoli 3 o'clock in the morning, went to a house belonging to an armed group in Tripoli. And he was cornered there. At 5 o'clock in the morning, negotiations started with the Dbeiba government that granted Bashagha and his Minister of Health a safe passage out of the city. At about 7:30 in the morning, forces loyal to the unity government accompanied Bashagha all the way to about 400 kilometers south of Tripoli to the town of Shwerif, where he was handed over to Tariq ibn Ziyad military unit that belongs to Haftar. And the thing ended right there and then after some clashes and the, like your report suggested, the killing of one person.
Silvia, this does not really seem like an isolated incident. This looks like a deeper political divide that has never been solved.
Yes, indeed. I mean, we have seen over the past 9 months or so, actually, a growth in tensions, political tensions within Libya after the first initial months of the government of Abdelhamid Dbeiba in 2021. And it's part of a general attempt by political forces in Libya to keep the conflict frozen in order to continue to benefit from the chaos and from the situation of uncertainty. This has, for example, been played out quite meaningfully in the way in which in late 2021, the need to undertake elections was confronted with discussions about the need to start from revising the constitution and how the constitution should take precedence over the elections. And I mean, all these discussions and the blocks that have been put to the electoral roadmap have been just a way to boycott and delay a process that was very fragile from the very beginning, but that could have, in the end, brought Libya to the next stage. Now we are kind of frozen in the situation of being really at the beginning of a transition, and a lot of uncertainty exists, and a lot of efforts that have been made in the past basically 1.5 years since a ceasefire was reached in late October 2020 have been wasted.
Okay. Mustafa, so in 2021, the United Nations led a political process to put an end to the instability in the country. That process paved the way for Abdelhamid Dbeiba to take over as Prime Minister. Then, in February this year, the parliament in Tobruk decides to appoint Fethi Bashagha as Prime Minister. Was this from a legal perspective, was it a legitimate decision by the Tobruk-based parliament?
Well, thank you, Hashem, for having me. I think if you consider the parliament that gave Dbeiba the vote of confidence last March, in March of last year, after he was elected by the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum in Tunisia, as you mentioned, if you consider that parliament to be legally elected and legally empowered, and its mandate has not expired, which is of course not true, then you have to accept that it's the same parliament that came back and voted Mr. Bashagha in. And we have to remember something very important here, the fact that the same parliament stripped Mr. Dbeiba the vote of confidence last September. So he became literally, legally speaking, a caretaker prime minister until elections, which was planned for December, but that did not happen. So the legality issue here actually touches everybody. You know, whether you say if the parliament is not legal, then it's not legal in the first place across the board. That means bringing in, giving Dbeibeh a vote of confidence, as I mentioned, then it's illegal as well.
Okay.
So you can't really say what's well, it's a democratic legal process when you get the vote of confidence, and then when you lose that and being replaced, you say, well, that's a fraud, that's illegal, that's.
You understand, Mustafa, why I asked you that question about the parliament, because you have three institutions here. You have the parliament in Tobruk, you have the unity government based in Tripoli, and you have the state council, and the three institutions creating loads of problem for the international community and people trying to understand what is happening in Libya. This is why I'm going now to Salah. Salah, this is what is happening as we speak. The Tobruk-based parliament is saying Fathi Bashaga has to take over. Fathi Bashaga has to oversee the drafting of a constitution that would be conducive to new elections, that would usher in a new era in Libya. People in Tripoli are saying no. Hamid Dbeibeh is not going to hand over power until the elections are held, until there is a new legislature put into place. So we have two different narratives here. We have two different worldviews here.
Look, what Mr. Fetouri said is not very precise. Okay, the parliament gave the Dbeibeh government a vote of confidence. But Mr. Fetouri told you correctly that the government was not chosen by the parliament, was chosen by the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum in Geneva. So, okay, you can take back the vote of confidence, which you gave the government by acclamation, but you can't install a new government. That's the business of the LPDF, which installed Dbeibeh. The parliament did not choose Dbeibeh. The parliament, as a matter of fact, Mr. Bashaga and Mr. Aguila, the HOR president, were on the opposing ticket to Mr. Dbeibeh and Mr. Mnifi. And they lost in Geneva. And that's why Dbeibeh came into power. Secondly, the Article 3 of the roadmap states that the mandate of the government extends 18 months provided that elections are held on the 24th of December 2021.
Which didn't happen.
So that's why Dbeibeh, which did not happen, so that's why Dbeibeh is saying, with some, I guess, justification, that he will hand over power to an elected government. The thing is, the thing that we have to understand is that neither Dbeibeh nor Bashaga are the important thing here. The important thing is that we need elections so we can get rid of the High Council of State and the Parliament, which have been in power for 10 years and jointly are responsible for 10 transitional governments.
Okay.
Keeping Dbeibeh is the only leverage we have to force these two bodies to give up power and set elections that 2.8 million people demand by registering for the elections.
Silvia, it seems that there's absolutely no way to have elections in Libya unless you bridge the divide between the East and the West, which has been the main reason why we're having these problems. And for this, I would like to ask you, do you think that this is the ultimate problem of the international community, the UN in particular, which has failed to deliver on the promise to unify the Libyans?
Well, there are a few points here. We know by the experience of other countries that elections are ultimately and by nature divisive. So in a country such as Libya, it's very difficult to use elections as peace-building tool. This is not going to work. But at the same time, as the previous speaker has outlined quite correctly, we can't attain to a new stage. We can't overcome the current deadlock if we don't move to new legitimate authorities that can really address Libya's problems. And Libya's problems are not the institutional problems. There are other issues, the security issue, of course, but also economic issues that people care much more about. And in terms of the second point about the international community, I mean, I think the failure of the UN, is due to many factors, of course, and partly this is also due to the fact that the UN, the roadmap and the way it has been managed has depleted the legitimacy of this institution in the eyes of the Libyan people. We know that there is also a looming deadline for the mandate of the UN mission in Libya at the end of July this year, which is quite important to recall. And so we don't know exactly what will happen. And just now, Western external players are starting to realize that if this mandate is not renewed, we will lose, the international community will lose in terms of being able to influence or to support the Libyan transition, whatever form it takes.
Okay.
But it's also true that in this past 12 years, it hasn't been very successful because of many resistance from the Libyan people themselves vis-à-vis the UN system.
Mustafa, the Tripoli-based national unity government has always been skeptical of any attempt by the Tobruk-based parliament to move forward. They say they are being manipulated by the most powerful man in the East, Khalifa Haftar, to orchestrate a coup, to undermine the people in the West. What do you think would be the next reaction for Khalifa Haftar against the backdrop of this political deadlock?
Well, I don't really expect much from, politically speaking, from Mr. Haftar at the moment. I think everybody is likely to wait for their firm position, if you like, until after mid-June or 23rd of June, as the roadmap brokered by Stephanie Williams last year come to an end, which means that the government of Mr. Dbeiba will also come to an end. And that's the big problem. That's the big question mark, because what will happen then? I think basically what has been happening in Libya since 2011, since the foreign military intervention, the lack of contingency plans, if you like, or plan A and the plan B, which means, by which I mean, if your plan A fails, do you have a plan B and how to implement that plan? That has not happened in 2011, because what happened then was Libyans were promised a paradise, in their country of democracy and economic growth once the Gaddafi and his government are gone. The following day, they are gone, and Libya ended up where it is today. There was no plan B. The same thing happened here.
Okay.
The first problem with Mr. Dbeiba was the fact that he bribed his way into the post of prime minister without a proper investigation from the United Nations at the time. So that was in November. In Tunisia, during the last session of the Libyan political dialogue in Tunisia before they moved to Geneva. I'll stop here.
Salah, when you look at the situation now, Libya, when the divide was going on, it created some sort of regional realignment. Egypt, the UAE and Russia, they were providing support for the East. Qatar, Turkey were providing support for the West. Is the political landscape still the same?
Definitely, as far as the Emirates is concerned, is no longer providing the support it was providing Haftar before. It has been reduced tremendously, if not stopped altogether. It found, I guess, in Dbeiba a known quantity. The Emiratis know Dbeiba since he was a high government official in the Gaddafi regime, and they seem to be comfortable with him, and they are in constant communications. The Egyptians don't want elections, because elections mean definitely that Salah is not going to be back as head of the parliament, and Haftar will be under great pressure because he has always claimed that he will only submit to an elected government in Libya, and they know that a new elected government in Libya may not guarantee the survival of Haftar. So the Egyptians are adamant about opposing elections and supporting Aguila, Salah and Haftar. Also notice that Haftar and Aguila, they were the ones who opposed the government of the GNA, the Government of National Accord of Mr. Sarraj, since its beginning. And that government was born out of the Khairat agreement between the parliament and the GNC at that time. Haftar again, after agreement between the parliament and the High Council of State and other parties in Geneva, declared 3 months after the government got its mandate from the parliament that he does not recognize this government and banned Mr. Dbeiba from entering the east or the south.
Let me go to...
That's why Stephanie Williams, in her opening speech in Cairo, said we tried everything. We tried transitional government, we tried power sharing agreements. We have to go to elections because all other solutions have
And she
failed.
also said we need consensus. Silvia, do you think that with the Cairo talks, that could be an opportunity to reconcile some of the differences between the key architects, particularly the Turks, the Egyptians, the Emiratis, the Qataris, about how to move forward?
Well, the Cairo talks have been crafted in a way to kind of go in parallel to the process that started in Berlin in January 2020. And there was the Berlin II conference 1 year ago. And I don't see why the Cairo talks should succeed in bringing, the regional players, the backers of the different factions in Libya to, common terms. Particularly because, as it was said, the Cairo doesn't have any interest in leveling the playing field and allowing Libyans to choose freely who is gonna basically rule them. So I don't really trust this process to have any meaningful result. It is a good opportunity for the time being to keep the channels of communication open, but I don't think it's going to solve the major problems. And this is an example of the fact that the regional players are back in the field in controlling the process because the international community at large and the UN in particular has kind of lost control of the situation.
Mustafa, this must be a very delicate moment for the Libyan people. They're looking at the situation. The politicians are jostling for power and bigger say. And at the same time, they're concerned that this could be conducive to civil war once again in the country.
Well, however unlikely, the possibility of another civil war is always there, and Libya is always a big risk and a present risk. And we have to remember that the risk has increased since the representative, Mr. Haftar, and the 5+5 military commission, which brought in the ceasefire in 2020, has already suspended its participation, the whole group, 5 of them. And they, not just that, they recommended to Mr. Haftar to consider the ceasefire suspended and even asked him to take certain measures to make sure that it is not in place anymore. And of course, they, as usual, they accused the other side, the government, GNU, and in Tripoli of violating the terms of the ceasefire. And they are partly right in this accusation because Mr. Dbeiba, when Bashagha was voted in last February, took certain measures that really violated the ceasefire, but not in terms of violence erupting again. But, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Mustafa, Fetouri, Silvia, Colombo, Salah, Elbakkoush, I really appreciate your insight. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Hashem Ahelbarra, and the entire team here in Doha. Bye for now.